Film fans YouTube, hello and welcome back to the channel. I am Josh, your movie apprentice, and today it's another tier list as we end the best month of the year. Last month I went to the London Film Festival, so I saw a lot of new movies. Now, not all these will be coming out this year, some will definitely be coming out next year, or might not come out at all, depends on distributions. But for me, these were new releases I saw this year, so they count very much in this list, which means I have 34 films to get through. So what I'm going to do is go through the 9 general UK releases that I saw, and then go into the London Film Festival ones, just so we have a wide berth. Now, to quickly go through the tiers, we have must see cinema. These are films that I feel like if you are a film fan, you have to watch these. Physical purchase says what it is on the tin, that I would happily own these physically, whether it be Blu-ray or 4K or any physical medium. Then we have the glad I watched. These are films that I'm glad I watched, but I probably won't watch them again. These are really good movies that I can't see myself ever revisiting. Worth a stream are those quiet background movies that I enjoy well enough that I might give it half a rewatch, but it might while I'm doing other things in the background. Then we have the not for me. These are films that I personally didn't enjoy, but I can see why other people do like these movies. And then finally, we have the do not watch category. These are films that I think if you're a film fan, it's not worth watching them. The positives by no means outweigh the negatives when it comes to these movies. I just can't see any reason people would overall enjoy them, unironically. So without further ado, let's jump right into this with Venom number 3, The Last Dance. And it's the same as the previous two. Venom and Eddie are great. They are a great dynamic. Their exploratory dialogue, very choppy editing, and quite frankly, just a lot of characters that I don't really care about really make this a flop for me. I can't even say it was the best in the trilogy for me. Quite frankly, I can't really distinguish the three apart from each other. There is literally a symbiote group that fight in this, and that should have been the coolest thing ever, but it's not even built up, it's just randomly thrown in there. And then the emotional things thrown in don't really latch on me too much. Whilst it did get me a little bit at the end, didn't get me as much as what a trilogy should do. It's no Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. So for that, I'm gonna have to say that Venom overall it's just not for me. Then we go into Terrifier number 3, and Art the Clown is definitely a modern horror icon. The performance by the guy that plays him is just absolutely incredible. He is always funny. It feels like it's a bit in the background in this one. And the gore, while a lot of people going for the gore, I don't think there's anything as messed up as there is in the second movie. I overwhelmingly do not like the first one. The second one I really enjoy though, because I genuinely cared about all the main players in that film. So seeing them die so horribly just has that extra impact. This one, unfortunately, went back to the first one's roots, just giving us a lot of stupid characters making stupid decisions, and it culminated in a cliffhanger that, whilst I don't hate the cliffhanger itself, the way we got to that cliffhanger was highly frustrating. It's an enjoyable watch though, and if you and a few Gorehound friends want to get together and watch it, then I would not hold that against you. For me, that is a film that is worth a stream. Salem's Lot is an easy do not watch for me. This is a movie that Stephen King adaptations used to be some of the best films ever made, and now they are just tripe that feel very soulless and very trivial. A Better Man I saw way back at the start of October, and Sebastian Stan is really good in it. But I just feel like it's a bit mixed in what it's trying to convey. This is a man that has this deformative illness that he overcomes through medication, chooses to fake his death from it, and then he is overshadowed by someone that has lived with that deformity and has decided he's going to shine with that deformity. And it's almost too overwhelmingly nice. I can't tell if he's supposed to be genuinely nice or if he's being that asshole kind of nice, when they're being smug about it in your face. Felt very jarring, and overall, it was just a very mixed bag for me. I would say that I probably will not be revisiting that movie. And is it worth a stream? Probably. If I had to say if it's between those films I think are really good and won't watch again versus those that are worth a bit of background noise, then I'll lean more towards that background noise sort of vibe. So it is one of those that is worth a stream. Joker Folie à Deux. I did not hate it. I just think it's a film that failed to live up to an overwhelming potential that basically doomed the movie from the start. I think there's a sweet spot which it worked. It involved a court interrogation, then a fantastical musical bit within Arthur's head, followed by the interrogation of Gary. I feel like that whole 10-15 minute period is where it hits what it needs to hit. but the rest of it just feels very lackluster, and I can't forgive for the ending for what it implied. The implication that he gets killed, spoiler alert, by Heath Ledger's Joker at the end. That for me was more unforgivable than the rest of the film altogether. It's a film that just wasn't for me as it was for a lot of people, but I feel like I don't hate it as much as a lot of people do. I would say that it goes above Venom because I feel like it's a more comfortably made film, but that's the only real boost I can give it to go top of the not for me list. The Front Room is an interesting one. It's a film that is distributed by A24, and you know they love to distribute those weird movies. And this is a film that I feel like the trailer showed more promise than the film itself. It was just an insufferable in law and a woman that was almost equally insufferable and they were just angry all the time. It's an odd one. Like nothing really happens in it, and the end feels very lackluster. But I was really entertained by the performance of the stepmother in this. So, or mother-in-law, sorry. Stepmother, mother-in-law, different things. But I feel like I was really entertained, but I'm not going to pretend it was a good movie. So for me, it is one of those worth a stream, but definitely on the bottom end of worth a stream because it is barely entertaining, but it's entertaining enough, in my opinion. The Apprentice, Sebastian Stan, is playing Donald Trump, and we're seeing his rise to become Donald Trump, and it feels like we skip a beat here. We go from him basically being tutored by this mentor figure, and there's a bit of a time jump, and suddenly he does not care about that mentor in any way, shape, or form. We don't see the involvement of this ambitious man into the, well, quite frank, cartoonish idiot we are today. It felt like a very middle ground portrayal of the man, but it doesn't feel like it really adds anything to his persona, his character, or anything. Like Donald Trump got upset by this film. I don't think there's anything worth getting upset about in it, but it definitely isn't praising him either. It's just a very middle of the road film. When the film focused more on Roy Cohn, I feel like it was just a better movie overall. And when he took more of a back seat, the film went down in its estimations for me. I'll say it's worth a stream, but it's not something I go out of my way to watch. Smile 2, the sequel to one of the most surprising horror movies in the last few years. Thankfully, this breaks the monotony lower table side of the month because Smile 2 was fantastic. It elevated what had come before and really added to it, utilized the premise perfectly, giving us a pop star as the main focus of the movie was a great choice. And Naomi Scott is phenomenal in this. I happily would own this on Blu-ray. It is easily one of the strongest horror movies this year, and this has been a year that has been very lackluster when it comes to horror releases. Look Back. This film is 57, 58 minutes long, but it is a feature according to the guidelines set by the Academy, and this tells one of the most beautiful stories of friendship, life, regret, determination, the hardships of being a creative, and just a general slice of life all in one go. It broke the dam for me 3 times during the runtime. Like when watching any anime film, and yes, I am a massive weeb, but I watched 2 anime films last month, and this was the superior one by far. It just had all the right notes, and I adored the 2 lead characters in this. This is a film that I genuinely do think could be an underdog for animated feature. More people just need to see it. So if you can see Look Back, it's an hour. You have no excuse. You literally get in, and by the time the ads start, you're literally out of the cinema again in an hour and 10 minutes. Because that is including the ads and trailers of 20 minutes. You're out of the cinema an hour and 10 minutes later. Easy. Go watch it. This is must-see cinema, in my opinion. Now we get onto my London Film Festival watch, and there's a lot to get through here. So we'll start with a film that did get its public release a few days after I saw it at London Film Festival, and that is The Wild Robot. I feel like Lupita Nyong'o is great in this, and the robot's relationship with Bright Bill is great. Pedro Pascal's Fox character in there is also a great span. It's just a great dynamic. I do feel like the film does fall on some cliches, especially in the final third. It does drag on a little bit too much. This is a visually stunning film filled with a lot of morbid humor that adults will absolutely dig, and the theme of motherhood and unity and how we need to put our differences aside to basically come together on certain things. I thought it was very impactful. Wild Robot is a very good movie. It's worth the hype. I just feel like it needed a little bit more. It's one I definitely own physically, but it's not quite that elevated top tier territory for me. And now we get to the deeper parts of the film festival where films don't even have posters yet, but they were getting screenings. The first on this list is Aisha. This follows a woman who survives a bus crash and manages to fake a death because there was someone on that bus that shouldn't have been on there that they mistake for her, and her journey of starting life afresh, but unfortunately being dragged into some seedy stuff. The lead character's arc is a really good one, but I did find the character very annoying. And overall, it's a film that I feel like had higher potential than what it reached, but it was still a solid watch for me. It's one that I would definitely say I am glad I watched. I would say it is worth a view. I feel there's got to be a lot of people that will enjoy it way more than I did. For me, though, it is just one of those where I'm glad I watched, but I probably would never revisit it. Now we get to The Surfer, an independent Nicolas Cage film, and you know what you're going to get when it comes to Nicolas Cage and independent horror slash thriller movies. This is a great time at the movies. You just have to suspend your disbelief quite a bit as what the character he plays endures in this goes beyond what anyone normally would endure, but you could kind of see why that had to happen and how we get to the big revelation. Once the revelation comes out, I'll have been happy the film ended there. Unfortunately, it does drag on a little bit too much, and it is one of those where it does rely on you to suspend your disbelief. But it is Nick Cage just being classic, over the top Nick Cage, but delivering a fantastic performance as well. It's definitely one that I would say is worth a stream to the highest degree. Last Swim. So I went into this knowing it was a coming of age film, and I was hoping that this was going to be this year's Gasoline Rainbow for me. A surprising coming of age film that was a first feature as well. And unfortunately, Last Swim from me, I found to be very frustrating. There is a plot in this that I feel like would have been executed better as a slow reveal over the course of the film's runtime. I feel like there is a character slash love interest in this that is not needed in any way whatsoever. You could literally give that character's role to one of the friends in the group. They even have a moment with the lead character that leads you to believe that maybe that dynamic could have existed there. It just felt very melodramatic and with manipulative score to try and get a whimsical response over mundane things whilst intercutting with constant reminders of a lead character's plight. It was just a very annoying film to watch because you could see potential in it, and there were several changes that could have easily been done script wise to make it a far superior film. So that it's not, I wouldn't say it's a do not watch kind of film because it is a first feature. I will always say support new filmmakers, but for me, it's just not for me. This one, this is the kind of coming of age film that I feel like is very manipulative and just did not work for me in any way, shape, or form. On Falling is 90 minutes of a woman working in basically an Amazon warehouse and going home and having food, and the occasional spark ups is revelations that they are stealing food from the cupboard. And that's basically it. Whilst I get what the film was going for, trying to really put a spotlight onto how monotonous and lonely a lot of working life can be, how little someone can live their life when they're just so focused on just making a payday and not actually living. I liked what it was trying to do, but I don't feel like this needed to be a movie. It felt like this could have been a nice short film, but it ended up being a 90-minute feature length movie that is just a whole lot of not a whole lot going on. And that's just something that doesn't quite work for me. So for me, I'm going to have it as a not for me tier because it's not even enjoyable as a stream. And I can't say it's a film I'm overly glad I watched, though I respect the themes it tried to dive into. Sebastian follows a journalist who becomes a male escort on the side and uses his experiences in that job to write a novel about a sex worker. And I feel like this film had a lot of potential again, but I could not stand the lead character in this. I found them very frustrating. I get sick of the trope of a character getting repercussions for actions and then being surprised by it when they are the obvious repercussions that will inevitably come to pass. I will say it's greatly enhanced later on with the introduction of one particular individual who really elevates every scene that they are in, and it is worth watching just for that performance and those intimate moments where the walls come down. It's a decent watch. I am really glad I saw Sebastian. I'd highly recommend it. to people just as a viewing experience, but I personally did not enjoy the lead character so much, and that's what really held it back for me personally. So this is going very much in a glad I watched. Next up is Stranger Eyes. And this is a film that I feel like under-delivered on the basic premise, and after later discussions with a fellow critic of mine, Stu Talks, it's a film that I feel like I can admire more than I like. There's always that one film at the festival that I tend to admire more than I enjoy. I think there was a few this year actually, but for me, it's a film that I can't see myself revisiting. I was very lost when it came to this film, and it felt like there was promise to it that didn't quite come to fruition. So it wasn't for me personally, and it's very middle of the road on that not for me kind of tier. Now we get to Blitz, and this is a film that we'll be doing a full review for. You have voted in the community poll, I've not forgotten. I'm just taking a bit longer getting to the reviews than I thought I would do this year. But for me, I'm going to have to say that Blitz is a film that spends less time talking about the Blitz and instead spending more time being a soapbox that tries to tell the audience something that I'm pretty sure a good 95% of people do have the common sense to know at this point, and the fact that it utilizes a trope that I always assumed was a negative thing from what I've heard from certain communities, and that being used to tell this story, it was just frustrating. Didn't care for the kid in this either. There are scenes that are just kind of, it feels like it goes from seeing the scene without any connection. There's literally a big moment early on in the film that never comes back and feels very pointless and almost mean spirited. Blitz is a film that promised the tale of a mother and her son separated by the Blitz, and the son desperately trying to get to her mum. And it spends about maybe 25% of the film truly focusing on that. Wasn't for me in any way, shape, or form. There is a solid performance by Saoirse Ronan, but that is all I can really say about it. Blitz was just not for me. I found myself very irritated by this movie. Conclave, however, is a film that if you saw my review, you know I adore this movie. Ray Fiennes is incredible in it, as is Stanley Tucci. All the cast in this are really good. The way it used its script and dialogue to tell such a compelling story is something that I heavily admired, and I am really happy that this film got made. A political thriller set in the Vatican was not on my bingo card as a film I'd find engaging and enjoyable, but lo and behold, it was. Conclave for me is one of those must-see kind of films. The performances in this are just top-notch, and the cinematography, don't get me started on it. Amelia Perez is an ambitious musical filled with a star-studded cast, but this musical, whilst it is the much better musical from that month, it's a musical that doesn't really have any standout numbers outside of maybe a plastic surgery song that I can only kind of remember because it uses the same, well, it has several words that end the exact same way, and it's very over the top and comical. Like choreography wise, cinematography wise, it's a great movie. It's very entertaining, but in terms of just the story, it was lacking for me. I'm getting sick and tired of this trope of people not doing the smart thing and just stopping the car. That's all I'm gonna say. But yeah, it's worth a stream. It's a lot of fun, but I feel like it really underdelivers. Julie Keeps Quiet follows a tennis player who's very good, and her tennis coach is suspended and being investigated for some things. And I liked how the film approached this. We never see the relationship she had with a coach, but we are shown enough through conversations and just her mannerisms to know that there was probably a very inappropriate, intimate relationship happening there. And seeing the build of her just keeping quiet about the whole thing and letting the whole scenario play out before we get to the final act, where we find out if she ever does actually break her silence about the whole situation. I thought it was a very ambitious little film. Very little happens, but it is an engaging film, and for that, it's a film that I'm going to say I am very glad I watched, but I can't see myself going my way to watch it again. But it was a very interesting film to dive into and a fresh approach into a sort of almost subgenre that's become too reliant on the shock value of explicit scenery or depictions of real stuff that happens. This film had some reservations and held back, and I feel like it worked all the better for that. We didn't need to be shown, we just had to put the pieces in our head together. Queer, starring Daniel Craig, directed by Luca Guadagnino, is a film that I didn't get. I did not understand what was going on. It really perked up in the final act, I would say, but it just feels like it's a whole lot of different kind of plot threads randomly strung together. It feels like this is a very much a Marmite film from the people I've seen it with. There are some that are like me, really didn't like it, and there are those that praise it as this fantastic piece of cinema. But I would say it's definitely an interesting film to check out, especially for some of the weird stuff that goes down in that final kind of act. And the Jason Schwartzman support performance in this is always a joy. So for that alone, I'm gonna have to say this is another one of those that is worth a stream, but it isn't one of those that I'm gonna be revisiting anytime soon. There were just rare sparks that really perked the film up for me. Now we have The Wailing, which is the story told across a couple of decades through three different women that all experience this wailing sensation. It's a very atmospheric horror film, and it has some interesting characters in there, and I like the way they connect together. But it feels like there is a lack of resolution at the end of it all, and it feels like it's another one of those Babadook theme kind of things, but it doesn't really spell out what the theme is supposed to be in it. And I have thought about this movie and tried to figure out what this wailing is supposed to signify. And it could signify something, or it could just be another random entity that just attaches itself to these individuals for the most mundane and random of reasons. So for me, The Wailing is one of those films that I enjoyed. I would definitely recommend checking it out, but it's not one of those glad I watched kind of tiers. So it's another worth a stream that's getting very full, I've noticed. Now we get into Anora, the next Sean Baker film, and this film was an absolute joy. This is the other film I've reviewed so far from the festival, and it's a film that's just come out. Just go check it out. Mickey Madison is phenomenal in this and probably has some awards hype coming her way. If you're against sex and nudity in the film, you're not gonna like it because there is a lot of naked Nicky Madison. Because there is a lot of naked Mickey Madison as well as some side dick shots, just all sorts. So be wary of that if you're a bit prudish. But yeah, Honora, great film. I love the character of Honora overall and the arc they go through. Very entertaining. Go give it a watch. I personally would happily own this on physical. Bring Them Down, starring Barry Keoghan, is an Irish film about two rival farmer families that are in dispute over two missing rams. And I will say that this is a hard watch at times because it gives a very graphic depiction of some animal cruelty. So, animal rights activists out there, be warned. Um, I really like the parallel journey of two characters and how they go through a very similar thing. I like that aspect. It's a very character driven piece. It's a very slow burn film, but I do like where it went. It's a very slow burn film, and I do like where it went. And I seem to like it more than a lot of people did. Personally, I just enjoyed watching these dynamics play out and seeing these shift in perspectives. That is an element of filmmaking that I always have some enjoyment for. This is one that I am very glad I watched. Good one. I had hopes for this one, but this is a lot of. It's a strong script following a dad, his daughter, and his friend going camping, and seeing it all told through the perspective of the daughter's eyes. And there was a lovely little Q&A session with the director after the film. I went to a public screening for this one, and whilst I enjoyed the camaraderie and banter between the main three characters, nothing really happens in this movie. And the whole point of this movie is for the inciting incident to take place in the final 15 minutes of the movie. And that inciting incident fails to carry any weight with me because it doesn't really go anywhere. And that was just an element that really soured me on the film. I won't say I hate it, but I didn't like it either. It's very middle of the road for me, like the perfect middle of the road film. For me, it's a film that I'm glad I watched it, but I just feel like it could have had a little bit more in there. Now we jump into The Balconettes, and this is a film that, when it's being a slapsticky comedy showing the bizarre connection between these three women, it's absolutely fantastic to watch. But when it takes time to become a commentary on sexual assault and the effects it takes on women, it fails to have much of an impact because of how it is doing this in contrast with a lot of comedy moments. And that doesn't work for me. there was literally a scene that is very difficult to watch where a guy basically indirectly forces a woman to consent to the deed, and it's a very gross out scene, and it's supposed to be gross out, but then there's this whole comedic bit with these same two characters a little bit later, and it just didn't really gel for me. I got that they were trying to be a bit lighthearted about stuff, especially when it comes to the female form and female nudity, but it just didn't quite work as well as it did for me. If it stuck to just being this outright comedy with dark shades in there, then I feel like it would have been phenomenal. But unfortunately, it struggles to balance between being a satirical political commentary and being an outright political commentary. And that unfortunately means it's a film that I am glad I watched, but I will highly unlikely watch it again. Happy End. You know how I said Last Swim was the coming of age I thought was going to be my Gasoline Rainbow of this year? Happy End was that movie. Happy End is so good. A great coming of age film showing five friends that aren't your stereotypical, these are the best kids in school kind of deal. These are very much the almost hoodlums, the chavs, they aren't the most desirable individuals. They sneak into raves. They literally wreck a classroom and use it as their own private little clubhouse. And generally, personality wise, there's only like one or two of them that are generally academically gifted, and the rest are kind of just troublemakers. And I feel like that's what made the film work for me. Seeing them go through this last year of school and slowly change as people and possibly drift apart with some incredible cinematography. Like the cinematography in this is so good in way it frames some shots, from showing a wide to show a characters overheard the conversation to showing two characters look back at each other in silhouetted form. Just there are so many good shots in this. And I also adored its commentary on authoritarianism and free will, as well as directly acknowledging, as much as I would love to visit Japan, and I'm a big, massive weeb when it comes to Japan, its culture, obviously anime and that sort of stuff. I am aware that they have a massive racism problem, and this film directly deals with that. And it's saying like the Japanese hating on white people or black people. This is just like hating on a Korean lad who literally gets challenged by the police constantly, the same way you would see a black individual questioned by police in the US. It does a very good job of assessing these flaws in Japan's system. And for that, I think this is just a phenomenal watch. Happy End might well be my favorite of the year. It's on the fence right now with Sing Sing, but I genuinely was floored by this movie. Must see cinema, hands down. Then we get to Night Bitch. Amy Adams is great in this. This is a movie that is all about the hardships of being a mum and tells it in a very good way. It's a very unbiased look at the difficulties of being a mum and how bloody difficult it is. One of my best friends is a mum that is constantly complaining about being up all night. And as soon as I got through this film, I had to say to him, you need to go watch this because you will feel like it speaks to you. I had a lot of fun with this film. I will say the weird elements do feel a bit odd at times. It doesn't really commit to the weirdness. Like it teases it. It scrapes the surface, but never fully dives into the pool of weirdness that it had the potential to reach. But I had a great time with Night Bitch. I'm going to try and keep the rest of these brief because this has been a long video. Anyway, moving forward, I'm going to have to say that Night Bitch is a film that I am glad I watched. The Colors Within, it's an anime film directed by the person that made K-On! And A Silent Voice. So it was either going to go very wholesome or very emotionally devastating. Lent more to the wholesome, had some great musical pieces. Did not expect to hear an acoustic version of Born Slippy in there, but there it was. It's a perfectly fine watch. I had a good time with it. It is a film that I'm glad I watched. Will I revisit it again? Probably not, but it's such a wholesome, warm blanket of a movie. Piece by Piece, the documentary covering the life of Pharrell Williams, it embraces the concept of being told through Lego. It's a very bizarre concept, but it worked, and I feel like it made the story more engaging than it otherwise would have been if it was just a lot of people talking to the camera. It told the story in a very unique and stylistic way. But apart from the way it utilizes the overall gimmick, I don't feel like I've got a full picture for Pharrell Williams. Like there's a whole bit where he's talking about how he was always difficult to deal with. Yet the whole film is literally kissing up to him the entire time. So we never really get to see any kind of negativity from him. So I don't know, I feel like there's more layers or angles that could have been explored there. But I'm not a Pharrell Williams expert. pro aliens experts, by all means, go watch that movie. Come back and tell me how wrong I am. Because apart from the concept, it didn't really do too much for me, but I am glad I watched it. Audrey does South Park dialogue with real people, and it doesn't work. I couldn't stand this movie. It's going straight into the do not watch category. If you like black comedy, then maybe you get some enjoyment out of it. I like black comedy, but this for me was just a lot of awful characters doing awful things, and it's been to laugh at it, and half the time I don't even laugh when I'm supposed to be laughing, and the film pauses for that laughter. Audrey, just no. This is going straight into that do not watch category. Black Box Diaries documents the story of a woman in Japan trying to get justice for her sexual assault. And it's a very eye opening experience. And we really get to see her as just a person. Her reclamation is great. And there are some conversations had it that are very uncomfortable. And it's amazing how this came about before the Me Too movement even came about. And whilst I was not familiar with the story going into it, I was very captivated by it. And it's definitely a film that I wouldn't say is enjoyable just because of the subject matter, but it's definitely something that's worth checking out. I say go cinema to watch it. No, but it's definitely worth a stream, in my opinion. Bird is a movie that is. I enjoyed it, but I feel like it should have committed more to something that happens in the final act really changed the face of the movie. And whilst I enjoy the lead character in this, it just feels like once you get the full context of the movie, a lot of what had come before ceases to make sense. And that for me was a big problem. I would say that Bird is a film that is worth a stream, but nothing more than that. And finally, The Seed of the Sacred Fig. This is a film I went into expecting it to possibly be the surprise of the festival. And for the first hour, it is a 5-star masterpiece. But then there's a point where the film shifts in its perspective, on its focus. And that's when it starts to go downhill a bit for me, especially in the final act. This goes from a very difficult to watch political thriller in the first hour to an outright Scooby Doo cartoon in the final 20 minutes or so, which completely lost me. I went through so many emotions from this. I went from up here to full on. I went from face palming just out of difficulty to watch to face palming out of just frustration. That was my experience with The Seed of a Sacred Fig. Though I will say the story behind the making of this film is definitely interesting. Definitely check it out. This is a film that is not going to be allowed in Iran where it was filmed. In fact, this film had to be smuggled out of Iran because of the subjects that it covers, showing very real footage. So you're a bit squeamish. We'll warn you for that. So the behind the scenes stuff for this, it's worth 5 stars in and of itself. But I had to judge things as a pure movie. And for me, it's a very middle of the road movie. I am glad I watched this movie because that first hour is absolutely incredible. But unfortunately, it really falters after that first hour. And that is it. That is everything I watched in October, new release wise. Bloody hell, that was a long video. So if you made it to the end, thank you. Make sure you like and subscribe for more video views. That's coming all the time, coming up on the channel. Going to be reviewing Happy End, Blitz, Night Bitch, and The Clothes Within are my planned ones, as well as Heretic, which I'm really looking forward to see. But until next, everybody, I am Josh, I've been Movie Apprentice, and I'll see you all in the next video.